Greetings, this is Carl, and you are listening to another episode of 50 Fires. And today, my conversation is with Gretchen Rubin. Gretchen is one of today's most influential observers of happiness and human nature. She is the author of multiple New York Times bestsellers, including The Happiness Project, The Four Tendencies, Better Than Before, and Life in Five Senses. Her books have sold millions of copies in more than 30 countries. And on top of all that, she's the host of one of the top-ranked podcasts called Happier. We talk about the moment she walked away from her law career and the symbolic choice to not renew her bar dues. We explore the difference between being rich and feeling rich, and what it means to know yourself, and how even an expert in happiness can get tripped up by something like a gym membership that no longer fits. This is a side of Gretchen that you may not have heard before, and I'm so glad we got to have this conversation. So without further ado, I bring you Gretchen Rubin. Gretchen, where I would love to start is at the beginning. I'm actually quite curious about what's your first or earliest memory of money?
I think my first memory of money of having a conversation about money is I was in the grocery store with my mother, which I felt like I went to, it was like a huge part of my childhood. And she paid and we were walking out and I said, like, in this hushed tone, "Do we know anybody who has $100?" And my mother said, "Well, grandma and grandpa have $100." And I was like, "Oh my gosh. How did I not know this? What are you talking about?" To me, this was like, okay, well, that is great to know. I mean, I had no idea what $100 was. To me, that was like, a billion. So that's just a very fun. It's just a very funny thing that I remember. That's probably my earliest memory of money.
How old were you?
Well, I must have been like 5 because my little
Wow.
sister was not there. So, and we always were together. So, yeah, it must have been,
Wow.
yeah, 5 or
And
6.
and why do you think you remember hushed tones?
Well, it was just but well, I think it was because I was so overwhelmed by the answer, that my mom said it in this kind of dramatic way because she knew
Right.
I would get such a I was clearly, like, gonna be blown away by the answer. So, yeah.
Grandma and grandpa,
Grandma and grandpa have
they have
$100, which
$100.
is an
Yeah.
interesting answer when you think about it, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
What do you make of that? I quite like that. Like it was almost
Mm.
a slight deflection.
Yeah, I think it is. It's like showing that it's attainable and that it's like within your reach, but it's not like but it's out of reach as well. So it did. It
Right.
was it was it was a very wise answer. We've never talked about it. The next time I talk to my mother, I'm gonna tell her. I'm sure she has no recollection of that, but I'll have to tell
Yeah.
her that I think she made a very to me that seems like a wise answer. I don't know. What do you
Yeah.
think?
No, I really I like it because it was I'm always curious about when I look back on some of the earliest questions I got from my kids, I didn't do a particularly good job. I did a lot of the like, that's none of our business sort of answers,
Mm-hmm.
or we sort like just replicating what I had been taught. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's we don't talk about that. And I remember seeing in the rearview mirror actually, because one of my kids was in the back seat when they asked a question about the neighbors buying something, and I said something like that's none of our business. And I remember seeing in the rearview mirror this very confused sort of face, and
Were they asking how much they paid, or what was the
yeah, it
question?
was like they must be rich. They bought it was a water ski boat. Not that
Right.
it matters, but it was, the water ski boats are now expensive. They must be rich. They got a boat. And I remember saying, well, that's none of our business. And then
Mm-hmm.
looking in the rearview mirror and seeing this sort of like confused look, and then being able to catch it and say, hey, tell me why you're asking,
Mm-hmm.
or tell me more. Just like a way to buy some, at least make it neutral and buy a little bit of time. And that feels very much like grandma and grandpa have $100.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't a
Yeah.
negative experience, and yet we didn't have to talk about it specifically.
But I think as a child, a lot of it is you just honestly don't know. You're like, what does it mean to be rich? At what point of money is a person rich?
Does any of this
What
mean?
yeah, what does any of it mean? Like they have a dog. Does it you literally
Right.
do not know the meaning of things. And I remember and sometimes I think people think their children are spoiled when they ask for things, but I'm like, your child has no idea
Yeah.
that what that costs or like the significant or like the status signaling of it or something. They just see something that looks pleasant or fun or whatever. Like, oh,
Yeah.
can't we go skiing? It's like they don't know what that means to you. They're just like, oh, people say skiing is fun. I like being in the snow. Let's go skiing. Like they don't have a sense of like, oh, I'm asking for a fancy vacation. Or maybe they do. They might, but I think a lot of times they like at least sometimes I think I would feel like my children were just like they're just they really didn't know this they had no real understanding of what they were talking about,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
because they lacked the sophistication of the in the world.
For sure. That actually reminds me of a funny I don't think I've ever mentioned this. We had a one of our kids was on a sport. We had 4 kids, and so sometimes they went to like parents sports meetings without a parent because we had to divide and
Yeah,
conquer.
you're
And
outnumbered.
one of them came home with a sheet and it had the budget for like it had the cost of the uniform and then it had the budget for the whole team. And she'd gotten those 2 confused and
Mm,
was like, "Hey, I need some money to get uniforms."
mhm.
And it's it's not very much, but I mean you get 3 uniforms and you get a sweatpants and you get a hoodie and you get all this stuff and it's only $5,000 or something. And
Right.
we were like, "What?
Yeah. Yeah.
What?" And she
Wait.
was like, "It's not that much."
Right,
Right? But
right.
to
Yes.
your point, had no
Yeah.
reference point for
Yes.
that, which
Right,
is
exactly.
a little
Yeah.
incriminating
But
on
there
our part.
probably were people around being like, "Okay, this seems real. Oh, you get a lot for your money." Like, she was just sort of like, "Oh, okay. This is what this is what it is." So, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe she even felt sophisticated that she was like, "Oh, it's a good deal." She like, I don't know.
For sure. I mean, the number was like $250 or
Right.
something on the
Yes.
upper line, you
Right.
know?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a
Yes.
little yeah, a little incriminating on our part, it feels like it's
But I think that's part of the way, like, people take advantage of college students and stuff, but they're like, "Oh, this is a great deal. This is what it costs." They're like, "Oh, I guess that
yeah,
is a great deal." They don't have their own independent judgment about, like, whether
yeah,
something should give them sticker shock or not.
totally. Do you remember if you were one of the poor kids or the rich kids in junior high?
I was exactly in the middle, which is the perfect place to be.
How did you know that? Are you
I
making that
don't
up in
know.
hindsight, or did you know it
I
at the
have
time?
thought about that many times. How did I know? How did I
Yeah,
know? There were people who didn't have as much, and there were people who had way, way more. Like kind of the exceptional ones, kind of at the extreme end. There were a few of those, and I was right in the middle.
do you remember knowing there were people like, can you remember a story where you came to realize there were people that had way more?
Well, there was somebody in my class whose family had a family-owned business that's like like Russell Stover candy. So this was like something that it was like you're like, oh, it's a huge company because it's like a national brand. But I had very little, and then I think at some point they sold it, but like I didn't understand like what that meant. But I knew they had a big house. I knew that they had like a ranch. Um, but not in a hugely ostentatious way. It was just sort of like, "Huh," and then, like, if you went to their house, there was, like, a big jar that had chocolate in it. That was, like, the only thing that was sort of and I was like, "Oh, that's cool," but
Yeah,
it was not a huge it was not a it did not play a huge role.
super interesting.
Yeah.
Do you remember sort of wanting more?
So, okay, so Carl, here's a question for you.
Yeah,
This is a question that I had with my mother,
okay.
and I may be wrong about myself. So maybe like everybody around me is rolling their eyes and saying I have no self knowledge. But I have 2 daughters, and I was saying to my mother, like, one of the things I so worry about is like having spoiled children. And she
You
said,
were
I
saying
was
that.
saying that to my mother.
Okay,
I
okay,
worry about having spoiled children.
okay.
And I said, but when I was growing up, I got everything I wanted. And I don't feel like I was spoiled. And she said, "You are not spoiled." And I said, "I don't feel that I am spoiled, but why aren't I spoiled?" Because when I say I got everything I wanted, it's like like we would get things for like Christmas and your birthday. It's like if you really want that pair of jeans, ask for it for your birthday, or like you really, really,
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
whatever, or like I really love books, and so we would never buy books. We would get for them from the library, but when we would always do this like big like road trip to North Platte, Nebraska to see my grandparents, and it was like we're gonna go to the bookstore and you can buy like 5 books, 10 books to take on the trip, and that was like a huge deal. But like I had this feeling of like, or like I had enough like as a high schooler, you want so much to fit in. My parents really understood that. Like, my mother was like, "Absolutely 100%. If you feel like you really want this pair of shoes," which I personally think are hideous, because that's what all the other people are wearing, like, that's okay with me. And so but I had no extraordinary demands. Like, I didn't ask for anything that wasn't sort of, like, age appropriate, um, but I got what I wanted, so why
Huh.
wasn't I not spoiled? Am I spoiled? Maybe I am spoiled. I probably am spoiled.
What you've clearly thought about this.
Yeah.
What do you make of it now? Like, what have you concluded?
I guess that I think that being spoiled isn't a matter of like having what you want or not having what you want, but feeling like, are you entitled to it, or feeling like it's somebody else's obligation to supply it, or I don't know. I don't know. I have a friend, Ron Lieber, who wrote a book called The Opposite of Spoiled, and he has a whole theory about being spoiled and stuff. But I don't know. I don't know. Now I don't even really know what I mean by the word spoiled. Maybe now today people would use the word entitled more than they would use spoiled. Because
Yeah.
I don't think I felt entitled, like, specifically. I don't know.
Yeah.
These are tough. I don't know.
We'll be right back with more from 50 Fires. Welcome back to 50 Fires. So I'm curious about. I would love to talk a little bit about what you pointed to earlier with your own kids and thinking about spoiled. But before we do, tell me about money growing up in your house. Like, was it talk? Do you remember hearing your parents talk about it? Like,
Never.
how was money? Never.
Never. Never. That was grown up business.
Is that
So
something? Is that languaging something you heard? This is grown up business.
what an interesting question. I don't remember. I don't consciously remember like anybody saying to me like you don't need to worry about that, or that's not your concern. But I just remember thinking um like one thing my parents never did is they would never gossip about people in front of
Huh.
us. I'm sure they did in private. I mean, looking back on it now, but they would never comment on another adult. And if I would ask something, they would just be like, "That's grown-ups business," so there were certain things that were like, "That's just grown-ups business."
Yeah. In hindsight, do you wish you would have known more about the financial situation in the family, or are you glad that you didn't have to worry about it?
Well, I feel like the right answer is to say that I wish I had known more, and but I have
Yeah.
to say there is something very nice when you're a
Yeah.
child and you're like, "Well,
Yeah.
that's just grown-ups business," and it's just not something that I have to worry about, and it was never presented to me like something that I did have to worry about. And I feel I do feel like it was kind of, I know that many children are really very deeply concerned about their family's financial situation, and they are, so I feel like, it was a worry that I did not have, you know, and I was not curious about it either.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's come up a couple times too, where people have said I didn't know anything about it, and I was actually really glad. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to replicate. One case, I was thinking of Josh Brown, the financial advisor, author, CNBC personality, and a good friend, and he said the same thing. He was like, "No, I'm glad I didn't." And so, what are you doing? How is money work in your house in terms of talking about it?
We probably didn't talk about it as much as we should.
Is
We
that
have
is
a
that true? Why should? That's an interesting
mm.
given your experience.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I just made that assumption, but I think you're right. I think I'm feeling better about that choice now because maybe um and then we have a 26-year-old, so we're starting to because she's talking about things like how do I think about a 401k? And she needs to go on her own insurance this year, and
Mm.
stuff like that. And so we're talking about it more
Yeah.
with her. Yeah.
So, but talking about it growing up, like, how did you handle this? Um, can I have that? Or why don't I? Like, how did you handle those questions when you got asked by like my situation where somebody said, hey, the neighbors bought a boat, they must be rich. Did you have any of those experiences with your kids, and how did you handle them?
Well, I did this thing with my children when they were little. If they would want something in a store before they could read or like really understood what was going on, they would be like, I want that." I'd be like, "Yes, that's so nice, but that's just for display. That's not for sale." And they'd be like, "Oh, okay, cool." I'm like, "That's just to make the store like more appealing." And they'd be like, "Okay." I'm like, "Some things are for sale and some things aren't." And they're like, "Okay." And so that worked for a while.
Right, right.
And I would just say like that's too expensive for what it is,
Mm,
and it's
mm.
funny, like, and my daughters kind of have the same sensibility that I do. I mean, I think that uh like my husband and I have very similar values. Our children have very similar values, and not to say that those are the right values or the wrong values, but often in a family people have very different values, and that can create conflict. Obviously, though, it might be very constructive, but for just our situation is that we basically all have the same values even when we were young. So if I would say something to one of my children being like, "I get it. I really like it, but that is just way too expensive for a sweater. Like, we're not going to spend that." They'd be like, "Okay, I got it." They never were really like
Huh.
begging for something that I thought was unreasonable.
Yeah.
The one thing that they really, 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 really wanted was a dog, and we did get a dog. So that was the thing that if I was like, "Is there anything that my children begged for?" It was a dog.
And you ended up caving.
Oh, but it took me a long time. It is so sad. I got I got my younger daughter a fish, a betta fish, because she was
Oh
just begging
no.
so like pitifully for and like the love and the care and attention that she lavished on that fish is really quite heartbreaking. I mean, I think I gave in to getting a dog because she came into my room and she's like, "You know what?" Esther was the name of the fish, and she goes, "I think Esther knows me. Like she swims around like really enthusiastically when I come into my room." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this girl needs a dog." So we did get a dog. But other than that, but a lot of times I would get my daughters what they wanted because I felt like what they wanted was reasonable. So I feel like, it was that, they were like,
Yeah.
you know, um,
So good.
yeah.
So good. Um, yeah, that I remember the display story. I remember my youngest. No, we weren't Disneyland people. Sorry to all the Disneyland people, but we just weren't Disneyland people or cruise people.
Mm.
Um, and I was like, I'm going to take one of my kids to Disneyland. So my youngest daughter, I tried to convince her that the Santa Monica Pier, where they have the roller coaster and the Ferris wheel.
Sure.
I was like, trying to convince her that the Santa Monica Pier was Disneyland. So
How
we
old was
went.
she?
I can't remember. I need to ask her because we went and we rode the one roller coaster on the Santa Monica Pier. I was like, this is like Disneyland. And then she's like, I said, okay, we can go to the real thing tomorrow. And she's
Mm.
like, I don't want to. And I was like, oh, what do you want to do? And she said, well, could we just rent a convertible and drive along the PCH? And I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, we can do that. So anyway, my little foil of trying to convince her that the Santa Monica Pier was Disneyland, I guess it did actually kind of work. So sometimes those tricks do work.
That is so interesting. I
Yeah,
love that. You're
yeah,
like, "Here it is." And she's like, "Where are the teacups?" And you're like,
yeah,
"Oh,
yeah.
that's only in the summer."
Exactly. Let's get a corn dog.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Tell
yeah.
me, do you remember a time when your relationship with money changed dramatically? Like, was there a moment when you were like, oh, I'm now a grown up, or oh
Mm.
boy, this? Or was there a moment when your relationship with money changed dramatically?
Well, it wasn't about money per se, but money played a very important symbolic role. So I met my husband in law school. He was a year ahead of me in law school, and we both sort of started out in law, and we moved to DC together. And I was clerking for Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, and like at that point, he was working, I think, for the Clinton campaign, but he was a lawyer and he had been at a law firm. And no, wait, well, yeah, Right. So then we moved to DC. He did that. Then we both got jobs like at the Federal Communications Commission, again, working as lawyers and kind of in an administrative agency. And then we moved back to New York City. And when we did that, I switched to being trying to write a book, trying to write my first proposal, trying to get an agent, trying to sell that book proposal. So I had been having like a full-time job, but I'd been writing the book on the side. My husband had been taking financial accounting at night at GW. And so when we moved back to New York, I was like, okay, my full-time job now is to try to write this proposal, sell this proposal, get an agent, and try to, make a life as a writer. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. I'd rather fail as a writer than succeed as a lawyer. So let me take my shot and see if I can do it. And my husband was like, let me see if I can get a job in finance. This is what I want to do. And he did. So we were in the middle of this, and the letter comes from the New York State Bar Association. It's time to pay your bar fees, which is a lot of money. This is not $25. This is not a, ceremonial thing that you are part of. It is expensive. And I said to my husband, Jamie, should we pay our bar fees? And he said, why would we pay our bar fees? Meaning like, that's over. We're not doing that anymore. And at the time, it was like, dun, dun, it felt extremely dramatic. Like, we're burning our bridges. Like, we're doing this. It felt super exciting. And like, we're racing into the future. Now, of course, I know if we had like decided in 2 years, you just pay the missing dues and take a continuing education class. I think we could have easily joined the New York Bar Association. Who knows? Maybe we could still rejoin if we needed to. But at the time, it felt very significant. And that the decision of not paying that money, of not like sort of that safety money, like we're just going to keep this alternate career that we've both invested so much time, money, and energy into. We're letting it go and we're moving on. Was very, very striking to me. Like it felt like a very, very big moment to me. It's funny because my husband doesn't remember it at all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What do you, that's really interesting. I'm not necessarily looking for advice. I'm just looking for like your experience of something that you work so hard for, right? Like the stability and security. And back then, especially, it was like, go be and I would imagine that being an attorney, there was some identity wrapped up in that. I would imagine people were proud of you for that. Like, how did you make the decision to say, never mind, I'm going to go do that? And how do you square that with like follow your passion, like that kind of advice? How do you think about that?
Well, I went to law school for all the wrong reasons. I was like, I don't know what to do with myself. It's a safe option. I'm good at research and writing. I can always change my mind later. It's a great education for a lot of different things. I'll see if I can get into law school. Oh wow, I got into Yale Law School. I'll go. I'll see how it goes. Tell me what to do to succeed. Okay, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it. Keep telling me what to do. I'll keep doing it. And I did it. And I'm so happy that I did. It was an amazing education, an amazing experience. So many great things came out of it. But I call this drift. Drift is the decision you make by not deciding or just making the default choice or what everybody else expects from you. And for me, it was just like, this was just like an easy thing that, because I didn't know what else to do with myself. And so I didn't seek it out for the stability. I didn't seek it out. I was just like, I don't know what else to do, but like, I don't know what else to do. So I'll just do what everybody is telling me to do, which is like, well, why don't you apply for a clerkship? I'm like, okay, that sounds fun. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so,
right.
but then there I was clerking for a Supreme Court justice. And then it's like, and now what will you do? The options are wide open. And I was like, I have no idea. I don't want to do any of those things. So that was the first time where I really like come to the end. But at the same time, I had the idea for what did become my first published book. And I was absolutely like all my free time, I was researching and taking notes towards that project. At first, not knowing that it was a book, just doing it out of just sheer like obsession with the subject. And then I was like, oh, this maybe I could write a book about this. And I got a book called How to Write and Sell Your Nonfiction Book Proposal, and just follow the directions. Because again, if somebody says, here's what you should do, I'm like, okay, if that's what it takes, let me give it my shot. So it was really like, I didn't know what else to do. So I just did that. And then once I had like a thing that I really did want, because it wasn't even like I wanted to leave law. It was, I want to go write a book called Power, Money, Fame, Sex. I've already been working on that book. I have thousands of, pages of notes towards that book. That is the book that I want to write. And that did indeed become my first book. Um, so it was really pulling me toward it. It was so specific. And I think that made it a lot easier because I think a lot of people know they want to leave, but they don't know where they want to go. And for me, it wasn't even that I wanted to be a writer. It was like, I want to write this specific book, which I am
Mm,
already working on.
mm. A lot of your work, it seems like, is around the idea of sort of like getting to know yourself. Yeah.
100%. Yes. It's
Yeah.
all about
Like
human nature and self-knowledge.
identity and self-knowledge.
Mhm.
That plays such a huge role in how we interact with money.
Mhm.
How do you, I mean, it sounds like your story is pretty clear. Like there was a thing that pulled you.
Mhm.
When you don't have that, like, let's just for a minute, I mean, I don't know, probably at this point, millions of conversations about this, but certainly thousands and thousands of personal interactions around this subject I'm sure you've had. What do you tell people when they're like, I just know that I don't like this? And all the outward appearances, like, I should like this. You know what I mean? Like, I'm successful. I'm making plenty of money. I have this experience, Gretchen. It's probably the most common kind of like outreach that I get now because of where I live. I live in Park City, Utah. A lot of people come here for vacation. People have read the column or one of the books. They say they want to talk. Can we get together for coffee? We meet. They look around to make sure nobody's listening. They tell me something to prove they've won, income statement or balance sheet. Then they look around again and say, is this all there is? Like, is this what I did it all for? And I'm so curious about that problem. So how have you helped people who don't know what it is figure it out?
Well, it's hard because it's different for everyone. So
Right.
and you can't even say something like, "Well, you should just follow your passion," because a
Right.
lot of people are like,
Right.
"I don't have a passion," or "My passion isn't something that would lend itself to a full-time job," or it's not something that is susceptible to an easy solution or like a three-part plan. I think we really have to know ourselves. And the thing is that's interesting too is you kind of have to know the world because like you have to know what the world of possibilities are. And I think sometimes people don't even try to find out, what was I reading about? I was reading in the Wall Street Journal. There was an article about people who basically, I don't know if this is their full-time gig or like, I doubt it's like the only thing they do, but they were described as house therapists or renovation therapists because it's so common that people will embark on a big renovation and it's so time consuming and it's so frustrating and it's so much money. I mean, for most people, it's like it's a huge part of their money, and it's also ballooning out of control. So they feel it's a huge source of stress and anxiety. You can have conflict among a couple. So these are people who specialize in like helping you with that. And I'm like, who would have thought that is a job that a person could have? And you could wake up one day and be like, you know what I'm really interested in? I'm really interested in all the complex feelings and emotions that arise when a person goes through a challenging house renovation. But it turns out there it is. People are doing
Right.
it and they're, quoted
Right.
in the Wall Street Journal as the experts in it. And so, but it's like nobody would have said to you, oh, this is something that is extremely interesting to you. Perhaps this could be your business. Um,
Yeah.
so I think part of it is just you have to use your imagination. You have to think about your aptitudes. You have to think about your values. You have to think about your experience. You got to think about your
Mm.
risk tolerance. You got to think about what are the unique features of your life and your background and your capacity. I don't think that there is an easy answer to that.
Yeah.
What do
I
you
think you're,
say? I don't get that specific question very much. What do you say? I'm dying to hear what you say.
yeah, I think you're right. There is no easy answer, but I think it's just a function of learning to practice paying attention to the
Mhm.
little things that light you up. And
Mhm.
it may be like you said, it may be you have jammed those down for so long that there's
Mhm.
nothing there anymore.
Mhm.
But I've noticed, like, I remember when I would go to uh we used to go to this concert every Christmas season of a concert pianist named John Schmidt. He was like, he'd grown up in the neighborhood, so we would always go, and I just remember it growing from like small venue to like stadium size.
Right.
And I would go, and every for the first couple of years, I would leave there thinking, I need to learn how to play the piano. Because I like watching him do his thing would light me up. And I obviously learned, anybody who knows me musically would know that that's the wrong lesson. The lesson was like, okay, that feeling I was having was more about what's your thing, not what's John's thing, the concert pianist. So just starting to like, I call that dancing with dragons, like just listening to the voice again of like, oh man, I just had a conversation with somebody who's like, I always growing up, I loved fish and aquariums. He's like, I always wanted to have a fish aquarium shop. That's what I wanted to do. But my parents told me to be an accountant. He's like, there's one for sale in our town, like the last one, like, well, interesting to notice that maybe you could get more involved in owning a fish aquarium shop. Like
Or even
who,
just an aquarium.
or even just, or an aquarium maintenance for all the dentists in town, like
Right.
whatever it is. Like
Yes.
just paying attention to that kind of stuff.
Yes. Well, here's a chilling story, I think, about how easy it is to push down these feelings. And this is kind of in the
Huh.
negative, so but
It's
I
fine.
still I
We'll
think
turn
it's
it around.
interesting. So, I was at a brunch, a large brunch, and I ran into somebody who was somebody who, like somebody that had been was a was a mother who had a child in my daughter's class, and she was one of these people in your life where you're like, we should be friends, and like you really like each other, and you really hit it off, but then somehow the stars don't align and you never really take it into the true friendship zone. But so this was somebody who was an acquaintance I hadn't seen in a long time, but I felt very warmly to her and I was very excited to see her. So we're talking and I'm like, what have you been up to? And she's like, oh, we just went on this wonderful family ski trip. She's telling me about it. And she goes, oh, do you ski? And I said, actually, no. And like my favorite thing about my husband, he has a really bad knee. So we never have to go skiing because like, I don't want to go skiing. And she's like, oh, but you should. It's like, it's so beautiful and it's great exercise and it's a family adventure and you're out in nature and you're using your body. It's just wonderful. And I was like, I get it. Like, I see why it's so appealing, but the thing is, like, I hate the cold. I'm really uncoordinated. I don't like dealing with a lot of stuff. I just like don't like hassle. It's just not for me. And she said, and then we got pulled into different conversations. She came over to me an hour later and she said, Gretchen, you know what I realized? I don't like skiing either.
Stop it.
And here's the
So good.
thing, we
Yeah.
can all do things because we can all go to Disneyland because our kids want to go to Disneyland. We can
Yeah.
all do things because they're important to other people, or we want to participate, or we like some things, not the others, but we're going to do it on balance. That's fine. But what I think is bad is when you lose touch with your own sense of your own enjoyment or your own desire to do something. Because if you're telling yourself, I love skiing, I can't wait to go skiing, it's like, and you really don't enjoy it for yourself, then
Yeah.
something in you is not going to be satisfied because in the end, it's not going to be that much fun for you. And you're not going to be doing something else that would honestly be fun for you because you could be like, you know what I really want to do is
So
read a
good.
novel by the fire and drink cocoa. So you guys go have fun and I'll join you tomorrow. But today I'm just going to read my book. That's what's fun for me. But I mean, this idea of just this deep sense of disconnection
Mm,
to me was like, wow.
so good.
Right? And so, and
Yeah.
again,
So
and I
good.
think with the aquarium, it's like people are like, that's not real. That's not a real thing people could be interested. That's not a job. That's not something serious. What are you talking about? Nobody cares about fish. And then you're like, wait a
Right.
minute. It's a multi-billion dollar industry. Like there's whole giant, I mean, I bet there's a conference of a million people and Javits talking about, beta fish. I had a beta fish. Look at me. Um, but but you're right. You can start hearing these things in her
Yep.
head, and you
Yep.
stop realizing, like, well, maybe that's not true for me. Maybe
So
um,
good.
yeah, So I love the aquarium. Yeah.
No, this plays out so often with like the number of back when I was running my financial planning firm, eh, the number of people who would have these preset ideas, and again, like really good, valuable, thinking they were doing the thing you were supposed to do, and they'd walk in and say, "I need 5 million in a sailboat," and you'd
Mm-hmm.
be like, "Hey, that sounds really specific. It sounds like you did. Let's talk a bit about that. Like, have you ever have you ever been sailing? Like
Really?
yeah. Well, and I'm using a dramatic example, but
Right.
it might be at a cabin in the mountains, or we want to spend a couple of months in the and not and it was just an inherited
Yes.
mimetic desire. Like
Yes.
everybody else wants this.
Yes.
So even the idea of retirement in the first place in the modern era, right? Like I want to be done so I can not work anymore. Even that is just really, it's actually for everybody except maybe some really hard manual labor style stuff. It's actually not a good idea to go full gas and then stop. So learning to question, and I'm actually quite curious about this, knowing yourself and how you become aware. Are there any examples in, well, let me ask this question. If somebody found the last 10 years of your financial transactions, right? Like a perfect record, we'll just do your spending, a perfect record of all your spending. What would they know about you?
Well, this is funny because one of the secrets of adulthood in my Secrets of Adulthood book is like, if something's important to you, it should show up in your spending, your scheduling, and your surroundings.
Yeah,
Um,
so good.
so they would know that I spend a lot on books. I spend a lot on like
Physical books, by the way, physical
physical
books.
books. I'm a whole
Okay, yep.
physical books person. I spend a lot on like Google storage and like various backup things. I've got all kinds of like backup things. Um, what else do I spend money on? I travel a lot, but that's work spending. Well, that's work spending. So yeah, I travel a lot. So there's work spending and then also traveling. Um,
What would you be embarrassed for somebody to learn? Any hidden
um,
things in there?
I spend a lot on Diet Coke. That's for sure.
Okay.
I am not embarrassed about that. Others might think, Gretchen, that is a lot of Diet Coke for one person to drink. And I would say, is it? It seems like just the right amount to me. But well, and it's funny though, because like there's some things where like there's incredibly good value. Like one of the things that I wrote a book called Life in Five Senses, and one of the things I did for that book is I decided to visit the Metropolitan Museum every day for a year, which,
Wow.
note to self, live within walking distance of the Met. Like, of course, I'm so incredibly lucky, which I never take for granted, not one day. But I loved it so much, I've been doing it ever since. And the thing about it, and
Every
people are like,
day?
yeah, well, not
Well,
Wednesday, it's closed on Wednesday.
yeah.
But people are like, oh my gosh, like that's so many tickets. Like, no, because if you go all the time, you can join as a member, and then it's vanishingly cheap to go if you go every day. It's still a good bargain. Actually, as a resident of New York, I could go for free, but I feel like I'm going all the time. I should, like, be supporting of the institution that I love so much. Um, so that's like
Mm,
something that I do all the time, but it doesn't show up in my spending because I just joined.
mm. Is there anything like, is there anything that you realigned? Can you think of an example where you're like the skiing example a little bit, like your friend's skiing example? Is there anything where you're like, hey, we were spending money on this and we found out like it's just not what we thought it was, or it's just not important? Can you think of any example there where you were out, either you just learned that your spending didn't match what you actually valued?
I can't think of an example like that. Well, there
Yeah.
was a period. So, well, back to your idea of identity, there was a
Yeah.
period where, like, I went to the gym for years. I mean, decades. I would go to the gym, go to the gym, go to the gym. And then, like, there was just too tiresome, but just like a very predictable change in like the pattern of my life. It was hard to go. And I joined to my old gym. So then I joined a gym that was closer to my house, and I really didn't like going there. And in hindsight, I realized what it was. It was very rackety. It was super loud. And like once I wrote
Hmm.
Life in Five Senses, it was clear to me what I didn't like about it, and maybe I could have fixed it by joining a different gym. But at the time, I was so unself-aware that I didn't realize, like, I was just like, oh, I don't like going to the gym anymore. What I like doing is going for a walk in Central Park. It's beautiful, it's quiet,
Hmm.
it's nature. I want to do that instead. And so I was doing that all the time, but I just couldn't get myself to give up my gym membership because I'm like, I'm the kind of person who goes to the gym.
Mm.
I'm the kind of
Mm.
person who has a gym membership. And it took me a ridiculously long time to just be like, I have to let go of that identity because it's just not working for me anymore. I don't want to go to the gym, and I'm not going to the gym. I'm just wasting this money. But it really was much more about the identity, as you were saying, than it really was about like um just the efficiency, because the other choice I was enjoying so much more. Arguably it wasn't as good cardio, but it was much more pleasant.
Sure. Sure. Well, it seems like there's something under identity often, like which is a value, right? Like
Yeah,
if the
exactly. That's
value
true.
was like
Yes.
I stay in shape or I'm an active person,
Yes.
now I can start asking questions of how do I express that value,
Yes.
right? I can swap the gym for a walk in Central Park. That's all fine,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's
Yes.
aligned with the value.
Exactly. Exactly.
So good.
Exactly.
Talk to me about money and happiness real quick because you're like the happiness expert.
Mm-hmm.
What why do we give money this job? Oh, so first of all, can money buy happiness?
Money cannot buy happiness, but it can buy many things that contribute mightily to happiness. One of the
Right.
most important things that money can buy is freedom from having to worry about money, which is one of the biggest worries that people face. So, not worrying
Yeah.
about money is a big gain. It can also often buy us control, more control, and control is something that's very important for a happy life. It can allow us to put our values into the world, like we can, give money to organizations that we support, or we can put a child through college, or we can pay for somebody to have special tutoring, or we can have pets, which is relationships. We can travel to see friends, we can entertain, we can have a safe, comfortable place to
Hmm.
live. We can that we can become more educated. We can, there's just a lot of ways that but it really depends on you, what you want, and how you spend your money, because there's certain things that if you spend your money on them are likely to contribute to your happiness, and then things that are probably not going to, that your 18th pair of black boots is not going to move the needle for your happiness
Hmm. Hmm.
much.
Hmm.
But if you're like, well, should I pay the money and fly across the country and see my friend from college's new baby? It's like, probably that would make you happier.
How do you learn the difference between the things that because there's so much confusion about this? How do
I don't
you
know that there
learn
is
the
that
difference?
much confusion.
Really?
I think people don't stop and ask themselves this
Mm.
that much.
Okay.
I think sometimes they're just sort of on automatic.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't, and this is one of the things that I wrote about in my book Better Than Before, which is all about habit change. Like, I think that one of the things that we should do to maintain our good habits is to give ourselves healthy treats, because when we give ourselves treats, we feel energized and cared for, and we're like, like a cell phone that needs to be plugged into the wall. Like, we need to be energized sometimes, especially if we're trying to ask ourselves to do something that's maybe difficult, or we don't want to do, or we want to deprive ourselves of something. So giving ourselves
Mm.
healthy treats, because if you give more to yourself, you can ask more from yourself. But they need to be healthy treats. So that's something like listening to a new piece of music, or doing a crossword puzzle, or playing with your dog, or having an amazing cup of coffee, or whatever it is. You don't want to do something to make yourself feel better that just in the end makes you feel worse. And a lot of
Mm.
times people do impulse shopping as a way
Mm.
to like get a quick unhealthy treat, like a quick
Mm.
fix.
Mm.
um and impulsive behaviors are often, they are like, they are meant to distract, they are meant to like give us a hit. But then in the end, they
Mm.
just make us, certain kinds of treats just make us feel worse. So I think you have to say to yourself, is this just like an unhealthy treat? I just want a quick hit, but I really don't see that over the long term this is going to add to my happiness, or is this something that is going to add to my happiness? And I think usually if people stop and ask themselves that, they know the
Mm.
answer. The thing is, with the problem with impulsive behavior is you do it so fast you don't even notice that you're doing it until it's over.
So you don't think there's confusion. You just think it's fundamentally a practice of awareness, like just stimulus response, insert a space.
Okay,
Is
well,
this
do people kid themselves? Probably they kid themselves.
cute stories and
Okay,
yeah.
so I remember a friend of mine. He's a guy who would be totally frank about the fact that he's incredibly brand conscious. Like, he's one of these guys
Right.
who just pays a lot of attention to labels.
Yeah.
So he's renovating his house, and he goes into the Sub-Zero refrigerator place, which, if people don't know, Sub-Zero is like a super expensive luxury refrigerator store, whatever. So he goes into the guy and he goes, "Dude, you got to make this right for me. You got to explain to me why I'm going to get the Sub-Zero." Meaning, like, I need a justification. I'm
I've
spending
already
so much
done the
money.
thing. Right.
I'm
Right.
spending. I'm a customer. Just like give me a peace of mind. And the
Right.
guy looks at him, and in all sincerity goes, "It's really good at keeping things cold." And my friend's like, "You have to do
Done.
better than that."
Oh,
You know what I
really?
mean? This
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just like, it just keeps things cold. So, I mean, I do think that are there people, do we kid ourselves like, "Oh, this
Yeah.
Sub-Zero, it's going to last longer. It's going to give safety and security to my family." I mean, sometimes I think we do kind of like, embellish like what something's gonna do for us. But I think a lot of times it's like if you stopped and said somebody like, "Do you think that that was a wise choice? Do you think that that is something that's gonna make you happier, healthier, more productive,
Mm,
more creative?
mm,
Make you closer to other people?" I think people would be like, "Yeah, not really. I just liked it," or "No, not really. It's just like that. I just love buying watches, or just I just love sunglasses." Because it's like, do you really need a 10th pair of sunglasses? Because like, how often do you wear the other nine you have? And it's like some people might be like, I wear it all 9 all the time. And I'm like, then that's fine because then that for you is something that will truly
right.
that you can truly incorporate that into your life. But if this is just something that whenever you're on vacation, you go out and buy an expensive pair of sunglasses and then you never wear them again, like, are you telling me you think that you're going to be made happier by that purchase? I think you would say, no, this is just this dumb thing that I always do because I think it's fun to buy sunglasses.
Yeah. Seems to me this is where we get like 95% of personal finance advice we get wrong, because it does not get wrong. It's actually ends up just being a place to hide from the deeper work of knowing yourself, right? Like
Mm.
of just pausing. Like I'm pretty convinced that you can get all the benefit of hardcore budgeting by simply taking 3 seconds and noticing every time you spend money. Just
Ooh, well,
right, like
that's monitoring. They say that just monitor, not even trying to control your spending, but just monitoring how much you spend, people will automatically start to
for
spend
sure.
more wisely.
For sure. Let me ask you real quick as we wrap up. Loophole lightning round.
Yeah.
I picked a couple of loopholes of
Mhm.
your loopholes that I think like have some impact on money. I mean, almost all of them do, but maybe just quickly respond to the tomorrow loophole.
So the tomorrow, so this in again in Better Than Before, my book about habit change, I talk about the 10 categories of loopholes, and these are the loopholes that we invoke to justify letting ourselves off the hook. Because it's like, oh, I'm not really breaking my habit. It's just like this loophole appeared. So of course it's like no one could expect me to keep my good habit. So the tomorrow loophole is, well, it doesn't really matter what I'm doing today because starting tomorrow I am going to be so good. It doesn't matter that like for October, November, December, I really broke my budget because starting in January I am going to be so frugal. Or it's okay that I spent way too much at a bar last night because
It's
for the
tomorrow.
rest of the week I'm not going to spend anything. It's like I'm justified in doing what I want right now because tomorrow I'm going to be so good, quote good.
Yeah. How about the fake self actualization loophole?
This is a tricky one.
And
So
why did you? Well, yeah. Why did your eyes get big?
because I think this one is very like I love all of them. I was thinking I'd like to write a little book just about loopholes because I love the loophole. I should ask you
Yeah.
about the loopholes you've seen people invoke because I bet you've seen a bunch of really great ones. I want you to
Yeah.
tell me some of your most imaginative loopholes. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Um, Fake self-actualization is when you tell yourself somebody like, "Well, you only live once," or "I have to take advantage of this opportunity or lose out forever," or, or something like, I need to be true to myself in a way really that doesn't serve your aim." So you're something like, "Well, I don't wanna really compete for that because I don't wanna participate in hustle culture." Even though it's a promotion that you really, really want, you sort of say like, "Well, I'm gonna
Mm,
like self-actualize by letting myself off the hook." Or you
mm,
say like, "Oh, well, yeah, I need to prepare for an exam, but it's such a gorgeous day outside. Like on a day like today, like no one could expect themselves to be inside studying in a library." It's like,
mm,
it's this sort of like,
hmm,
"Oh, I have to live
hmm.
life to the fullest." And it's like, well, you want to live life to the fullest, but sometimes that means you have to do things that maybe are going to be challenging. Um, but it's sort of cloaked in this language of like, this is all really good. And it's kind of hiding the fact that it might be letting you off the hook in an important way.
Yeah. F- with regard to your own relationship to money, is there a loophole that trips you up the most?
Mm.
That you still are like, darn, that little loophole
Hmm.
did it again.
Well, usually my go-to loophole is false choice loophole, which is I can't do this, I'm doing that. Like I'm so busy writing, I don't have time to go to the dentist. And it's like, really? You don't think you have time in a month to go to the dentist? It's like, yes, you do. So that's my go-to loophole, I would say, but it doesn't really come up with money. I'm trying to think. False choice, lack of control, consideration for others. I don't know. I don't think I have a particular go-to loophole when it
This
comes to
doesn't
money.
count.
This doesn't count. Yeah, maybe this doesn't count. Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
no,
Well, a lot of people have that on vacation. This doesn't count. They do certainly for
Or
eating and
tax
drinking.
refund or like unexpected money,
Yes, yeah,
right? This
right.
is like a thing over here that nobody knows
Yeah,
about.
that's
Yeah,
one of the things that's so interesting is like all money is not created equal. Like there's all these special buckets of money. Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
For
right.
sure.
This doesn't
I
count.
see people a lot, and I do this too, a lot of like, it's I don't know what to call it, but it's, in fact, I just had one of my kids called this morning. Said, my friend just gave me a 30% off code to use at one of our favorite gear stores to get a new backpack. I was like, we gotta, I mean, we have all the backpacks you would ever need out in the garage, right? Like, so this idea of like, just because it's on sale, what did I hear? Somebody said an elephant for a dime is only a good deal if you have a dime and you need an elephant. Like, so this idea of just because something's on sale,
Well,
I've got to run by it.
I would consider that a questionable assumption loophole.
Yeah, there you
So
go.
questionable assumption is when you're like, oh, it could be something like, oh, I only have 2 hours free, so like I couldn't possibly get anything done on my novel today, so there's no point in writing. So it's like
Right.
that's a questionable assumption. But another questionable assumption would be like 30% on this backpack is such a good deal, we can't pass it up. And it's like,
Yeah.
I question your assumption that we need a backpack at all.
Yeah. It's so interesting to me how far we get off. We end up asking people a lot like, wait, let's back up. What are you trying to solve for? Because
Hmm.
sometimes you get so far away from the initial question, like, I need to pay my tax bill. And then suddenly we're having a conversation about cryptocurrency. And you're like, wait, what about well, no, the cryptocurrency was so that I could pay, so I could think the thing, and there was a tax, and I could generate enough money to pay my tax bill. You're like, wait, are there, like, how far off we can get from the initial problem? What is there a loophole? Is there a tidy little name for what are you trying to solve for? Loophole?
That's so interesting. Like,
I feel like I'm always bringing people out of the branches back to the
interesting.
things you have control over or that actually matter. Like, they're
Well, it could be
distractions.
planning to fail,
Mm,
a version of planning to fail, which is I'm gonna become so and so and so ambitious with everything that I'm gonna be doing. And I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna invest in that, and then I'm gonna do this, and then I'll get that return and everything. And it's like, well, obviously nobody could expect me to actually do any of that because it's just like that's some kind of bonkers. But you see this all the time. I was reading something where somebody was saying, like, oh, she was married to somebody and who had his own children and she had her children and she had all this money saved for her own children's college and her stepdaughter had already graduated from college long ago and wanted the money for the house for her house and her husband that girl's father said, oh well, we'll just you can borrow the money from us, we'll use this money that's been set aside for these younger girls college education and and then then the wife, the mother of the younger children was like, "Well, we can't do that because like how are we gonna how would we pay for these kids to go to college? Haven't even gone to college yet." And he said, "Well, you can make it up with investments." And it's like, "What? You're gonna make it up with investments?" It's like that is the magic,
right,
Uh,
right.
and I'm sure you hear these things all the time where people sort
Yeah,
of invoke these kind of magical terms, not really knowing what they mean, but knowing like these are kind of words of like significance that
yeah.
like if we can do that, if we can, well, let's just invest in cryptocurrency because
We'll
that's
just make it
just
up
like people make
for
tons of money
sure,
from that. So that's going to work out.
for sure. Gretchen, how do you personally define enough? How do you think about enough?
That's such an interesting question.
Thank you.
What context are you meaning in that, I guess? So I'm thinking, like, are you meaning in a one of the things I think about enough is I think a lot of times people will point to people who have a lot of money and seem to be wanting more and more money, and they're like they can't get enough. Like they clearly have extraordinarily bad values because they don't recognize that they have more money than anybody could ever spend, and it's just completely shows a
Mm,
distorted sense of value. And I'm like, at that point, it's probably not about the money. Money is money. Gertrude Stein said, money is money, and everybody has to decide if money is money. And they always do decide money is money. Money is money, but it's also a grade. It's also power and
It's also
influence.
a game for some
It's a
people.
game. It's a place in the world. It's like
It's
it
a
gives
thing
you
to do.
entree to worlds. It gives you entree to people. It allows you to be a benefactor. Like there's so many things that come from it. And so when people are like, well, like clearly they're just greedy for money. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
there's many, many things wrapped up in it. And so for me, what is enough? I mean, I guess enough is safety.
Hmm.
But then you say, well, what
Hmm.
is safety? Because safety can mean many, many different things. So it's a very multi-layered question. Well, how would you
Yeah.
decide enough? Oh, and I want to hear your loopholes. What are some of the good loopholes you've heard?
Yeah. Um, Interestingly enough is easier to answer just because I think we had Krista Tippett on, and when I asked Krista, she said, she invoked Relke and just said, that's a question I'm going to live with for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably my answer too, which is I think I've sorted out that enough is not a number,
Mm-hmm.
because if it was a number, there would never be enough.
Mm-hmm.
I think enough is a different kind of work. I think often we give money a job it cannot do when it comes to enoughness. Like if I have
Mm-hmm.
this much money, I will be
Mm-hmm.
enough. Like we have all this language around like net worth is very close to self-worth, right? Like we have all this language wrapped up in the idea that somehow money could do that job. But if money's if enough is a dollar amount,
Mm-hmm.
but we get very different answers. We've had people who are like, they had a very specific number in mind. Like
Mm-hmm.
when I hit that number and they have passed that number, they're like, that's enough. It was enough. I'm not worried about it anymore. But other people, you and I both know people that have more than anybody would ever seem to need, and still don't feel secure with money, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow's the
Yeah.
day it's all going to end.
Sure. Sure.
So I know what enough isn't. And
Mm-hmm.
I also think that enough is more about inner work than it is about a,
Mm-hmm.
a balance sheet.
Well, it's interesting that we were talking earlier about Power, Money, Fame, Sex. My first book, which I talk about very rarely because it's so long ago and kind of not, to me, it's part of the happiness canon, but I think other people would not see that necessarily in that, like as
Yeah.
a part of a whole continuum. But one of the things I write about, because I write about power, money, fame, sex, and then in each section at the end, there's a section about the blues. Like, what are the blues? What are money
Hmm.
blues? And one of the things that money is blues is that if you have money, you're sort of confronted by your own limitations in a way, because it's like if you have all the money in the world, you're like, because if you don't have the money, you can have this fantasy like, well, if I had the money, I would be this art collector, and I would go to all the auctions, and I would know everything about art, and or I would know everything about music, or I would eat at all the finest restaurants, and I would have this discerning palate, or I would be in amazing shape because I would have a trainer come every day. And it's like, but then if it's like, if you can afford all those things, it's sort of like, then you're just left with yourself, and you're like, you know what? You have really bad fashion. You really hate to exercise. You have a bad ear. You're just confronted with your limitations. And so there are these things that there are different issues that come up at different times. Because in the end, we're left with ourselves. And this brings us back to self-knowledge, which just keeps coming up over and over and over in this conversation, because I just think it's at the
Yeah,
heart of everything, which
I
is
agree.
the challenge of knowing ourselves and like building a life around what is true for us, about our nature, our
Mm-hmm.
values, our temperament, our challenges, our strengths,
Mm-hmm.
our weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
It starts with ourselves.
I agree. Well, just one final question. Let's pretend like I'm still doing this podcast in 20 years,
Mm.
and I have your 47-year-old daughter. Would she be 47
She'd be
then?
46.
46. 46-year-old daughter on. What would you hope she would say about her relationship with money at that point? 46 years old.
That she values money, but she is not driven by money.
That simple. Love it. Gretchen, thanks for having this conversation.
Thank you. I so enjoyed it.
You know, one of my favorite moments in this conversation was when Gretchen told that story about someone she hadn't seen in a while, someone she'd always liked. Her friend had just come back from a ski trip. You remember the story. She tried to convince Gretchen that Gretchen had to learn to ski, how beautiful it was, how healthy it was, how fun it was. Right? And Gretchen was like, I don't ski. My favorite part of this story was an hour later, that same friend came back to Gretchen and said, you know what? I don't like skiing either. I actually shared that story with my wife almost as soon as I hung up with Gretchen. And we ended up talking about how often we inherit our desires, right? How mimetic we can be with our desires. How easy it is to think that we want something simply because everyone else wants that something too, or so it seems. That moment where the friend came back and said, I don't like skiing either, which, by the way, I love skiing, but I understand the sentiment. That moment, that quiet recognition of a truth that you sort of had pushed down or buried, that to me was the most memorable part of this conversation. Because money isn't just about numbers and spreadsheets, goals and graphs. It's about the stories we inherit, the identities that we cling to, and the courage that it takes to say, this thing that everybody else seems to love just isn't for me. It's no longer serving me. And maybe, just like Gretchen's friend, that kind of honesty is where we can continue to find alignment between how we use our money and the things that are actually important to us. So thanks for listening to another episode of 50 Fires. And my friends, do me a favor. Right there on your phone right now, there's the little share button. Send this to a friend you think would enjoy it. And the other thing you could do is give it a rating on Apple Podcasts. And especially just type a little note in there, right? Type a little note, give it a quick review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That will help other people find the show. Cheers, my friends.
The views, information, or opinions expressed in this series are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Chip and Joanna Gaines, Binel Audio, nor Magnolia.